Over to your left. There's one behind the chimney. One just flared up.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
On the evening of March 13th, 1997, on a clear, moonless night made even easier for stargazing by the brilliant, naked-eye visibility of Comet Hale-Bopp, residents across a 300-mile stretch of the American Southwest looked up and saw something that would generate more sustained public debate than almost any UFO sighting in American history. At approximately 7:55 p.m., a witness in Henderson, Nevada, reported a large V-shaped object moving slowly to the southeast. Over the next 20 minutes, the sighting tracked with eerie consistency along a diagonal path through the Arizona desert. A former police officer in the small town of Paulden reported watching a cluster of reddish-orange lights arranged in a formation drift silently across the sky before disappearing over the southern horizon. By roughly 8 p.m., the object or objects had reached the Phoenix metropolitan area itself, where thousands of residents stepped outside to watch a massive, silent formation. Some described it as a solid, boomerang-shaped craft the size of several football fields, carrying 5 or 6 spherical lights arranged in a fixed pattern, pass directly overhead at a low altitude, moving at a deliberate, unhurried pace, utterly unlike any commercial or military aircraft they'd ever seen. Among the thousands who watched that night was a Phoenix area physician, Dr. Lynn Kaite, who described the object from a vantage point near Piestewa Peak as a mile-wide formation of orbs that she watched turn and resolve into a clear V-shape as it approached her position head-on. Kaite, who has said the sighting turned her from a skeptic into someone who has spent decades since documenting the case, would go on to write a book and produce a documentary specifically focused on the incident, helping keep public attention on the story long after most single-night UFO sightings fade from memory. Another witness, a 51-year-old cement truck driver named Bill Greiner, later described the sighting as personally transformative, saying that before that night, he would have dismissed anyone else's UFO story outright, and that he has never seen the world quite the same way since. Among the witnesses that night was actor Kurt Russell, who has since said in a televised interview that he was piloting a private plane into Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport at the time, and personally spotted the V-shaped formation from the cockpit, radioing air traffic control to ask if anyone else was tracking it. According to multiple accounts from that evening, several pilots who separately reported the object to air traffic controllers were told nothing unusual was appearing on radar at the time, a detail that has fueled decades of speculation, since a truly massive solid object gliding at low altitude over a major American city would ordinarily be expected to register on some radar system somewhere, even if military air traffic controllers weren't specifically looking for it. That was only the first half of the night. Around 10 p.m., a second, separate phenomenon began roughly 60 miles southwest of Phoenix, near the Sierra Estrella mountain range. A line of intensely bright, stationary orange-white lights appeared, seemingly hovering in a fixed row above the mountains for several minutes, before winking out one by one in sequence, almost as if something were being deliberately and methodically extinguished. This second event was captured on video by multiple separate cameras that night, providing far stronger physical documentation than the earlier, faster-moving formation. Footage that would circulate for years afterward as the most iconic imagery associated with the entire incident. In the days and weeks that followed, initial inquiries to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson turned up no record record of any relevant military flights that night, an answer that briefly reinforced the sense that no conventional aircraft could account for what so many people had seen. It would take months for a fuller answer to emerge. The base's own logs, rechecked more carefully, revealed that a visiting Air National Guard squadron had in fact flown training sorties along that exact corridor as part of a winter pilot training program called Operation Snowbird, based out of Davis-Monthan, but staffed that season by out-of-state units. The initial no-record answer turned out to reflect incomplete paperwork from a short-term visiting unit rather than a deliberate denial, an explanation skeptics find entirely mundane and conspiracy theorists find conveniently timed. By July of 1997, Arizona Republic reporters had traced the second event, the 10 p.m. stationary lights, directly to the Maryland Air National Guard's 104th Fighter Squadron, whose A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft had been dropping LUU 2B/B illumination flares during live training exercises over the Barry M. Goldwater range that night, a large military bombing and gunnery range roughly 60 miles southwest of Phoenix. The flares, deployed on parachutes from around 15,000 feet, burn slowly as they drift and descend, producing exactly the kind of steady, hovering light that would appear to hang motionless in the sky for several minutes before either burning out or slipping behind the same mountain ridgeline that had obscured them from certain viewing angles in Phoenix, creating the illusion of lights switching off one by one. Later, photographic analysis established that mountain terrain invisible in the darkness had partially blocked the view of the descending flares from certain angles around the city, producing what looked to different viewers like an arc of lights appearing and vanishing independently, rather than a single connected line of flares slowly settling toward the same ridge. Physicist Bruce Maccabee, who conducted an extensive triangulation analysis using 4 separate videotapes recorded that night, calculated sight lines from multiple independent camera positions around the Phoenix area and found they converged on a location at or near the Goldwater range itself, a finding widely cited by skeptics as strong independent confirmation of the flare explanation, and one Maccabee continued to refine using additional witness positions well into the 2000s. A decade after the sighting, in 2007, the specific pilot who flew that mission, Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones, confirmed the account on the record by name to Arizona media, closing out what most researchers now consider the single most conclusively explained portion of the entire event. The earlier sighting, the massive, silent, V-shaped object that first appeared over Nevada and crossed the entire state before reaching Phoenix, has never received anywhere near the same level of resolution. Skeptic Robert Sheffer has argued that what the public remembers as a single Phoenix Lights event was really always 2 unrelated incidents, connected only by the fact that both stemmed from the same, broader training operation, and that collapsing them into one continuous mystery has made the well-explained half feel more mysterious than it actually is, simply through association with the half that isn't. Astronomer and retired Air Force pilot James McGaha, who independently investigated both sightings, reached the same 2-incident conclusion, arguing the earlier formation was almost certainly a group of A-10 aircraft flying in tight formation at high altitude, exploiting a specific loophole in the rules. Military aircraft flying under visual flight rules aren't required to display the blinking anti-collision lights civilian and commercial planes use, only steady formation lights, which, from directly below at night, several separate steady lights in a fixed geometric arrangement can visually merge into what looks like a single, solid object. object. A 21-year-old amateur astronomer named Mitch Stanley, observing through a 10-inch telescope from Scottsdale that night, reported seeing exactly that. Individual aircraft, not a single fused craft, moving in formation. Independent researchers who have reviewed the case in more recent years have generally agreed that the two events deserve very different confidence levels. The 10 p.m. flare event, one detailed 2026 case file analysis concluded, has essentially no live controversy left for a fair-minded reader to hang on to. A named squadron, a named pilot confirming it decades later, matching flare physics and video evidence that lines up cleanly with known terrain. The same analysis was notably more cautious about the earlier V-shaped formation, describing Stanley's telescope observation as plausible and probably correct, but pointing out it was never confirmed by hard radar data, and that the initial military denial, then correction about flight records left what researchers described as a real, undischarged gap in the public record, rather than a clean resolution. Believers in a more extraordinary explanation for the earlier sighting have pointed to their own set of technical analyses over the years. Optical physicist Bruce Maccabee, working frame by frame through the available video footage, estimated the object's horizontal speed at roughly 30 to 40 miles per hour, with a slow, downward descent at altitudes between 13 and 19,000 feet, and calculated a light output in the range of 1.6 to 1.8 million candle power, bright enough, he noted, to be visible from 60 to 80 miles away. Maccabee also pointed out the specific absence, in both witness accounts and available footage, of visible parachutes or smoke trails, features he argued should have been at least intermittently visible if the object were in fact a formation of slow-falling illumination flares rather than something else. Separately, an engineer named Jim Dilatoso conducted his own spectral analysis of video footage from that night, concluding that the light's emission profile didn't match any known man-made illumination source, including standard military flares, a claim that has never been replicated or confirmed through independent peer review, and that mainstream skeptics have generally dismissed as methodologically unreliable, but one that continues to circulate as one of the case's more technical-sounding pieces of counter-evidence. Author and ufologist Richard Dolan has focused less on the physics and more on the sheer scale of consistent testimony, arguing that the sheer number of independent, geographically scattered witnesses describing nearly identical details makes a simple military exercise a less satisfying explanation than the consistency of the reports would suggest, whatever the individual merits of any single account. That tension, physical evidence that points fairly cleanly toward aircraft, sitting alongside human testimony that has never fully aligned with it, is, more than any single piece of evidence, what has kept the case alive for 3 decades. There's a strange footnote to Governor Symington's role in all of this that rarely makes it into retellings of the lights themselves. Less than 3 months after his infamous alien costume press conference, Symington resigned as governor following unrelated convictions for bank fraud and extortion connected to his real estate business, convictions that were later overturned on appeal, meaning the man most associated with mocking and later validating the state's biggest UFO story left office in the middle of an entirely separate scandal, a coincidence of timing that adds an odd little layer of irony to an already strange chapter of Arizona political history. What that explanation has never fully resolved is the near-total silence and total lack of any confirmed radar contact reported by multiple independent witnesses, along with just how differently the object was described by people who watched it with the naked eye rather than through a telescope, many of whom remain adamant decades later, that what passed overhead was a single, solid, opaque structure rather than a loose formation of individual light sources. No government agency, not the Air Force, not the FAA, not any state or federal body, has ever opened a formal investigation into the earlier sighting, specifically taken sworn witness statements, or attempted to reconcile the conflicting descriptions with hard flight track data. The stationary 10 p.m. lights got a name, a squadron, and an on-the-record pilot. The object that started the entire night never got an investigation at all. Perhaps the single most consequential witness that night was Arizona's own sitting governor, Fife Symington. In the immediate aftermath, as public pressure and press inquiries mounted, Symington held a press conference that became notorious in its own right, mocking the furor by having an aide walk out in an alien costume, apparently signaling to the public and press that the whole affair deserved to be laughed off. It would be a full decade before Symington revealed the punchline had been at his own expense. In a series of interviews starting around 2007, the former governor stated that he had, in fact, personally witnessed the object that night, describing it as massive, otherworldly, and unlike any aircraft he recognized, despite his own experience as a licensed pilot. He said he had chosen to keep quiet and mock the story publicly at the time, specifically to avoid triggering a wider public panic. An explanation that, whether or not you find it convincing, transformed the state's own chief executive from the incident's most visible skeptic into one of its most credible-sounding believers. Public interest never fully faded the way most UFO stories eventually do. A Rocky Mountain poll conducted not long after the event found that as many as 10% of Arizona residents may have personally witnessed some portion of the sightings that night, an extraordinary reach for a single regional event at a time when the state's population numbered in the millions. National attention arrived somewhat later than the sighting itself. Phoenix's own local news outlets covered the story only modestly at first, and it wasn't until USA Today ran a front-page feature roughly 3 months later, in June of 1997, that the case became a genuinely national phenomenon, part of a wave of coverage that has kept the story circulating in UFO documentaries, cable specials, and 25th and 30th anniversary retrospectives ever since. Dr. Katay's own 2005 documentary, The Phoenix Lights, We Are Not Alone, went on to feature interviews with both former Governor Symington and Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, lending the film an unusual degree of institutional credibility for an independently produced UFO documentary. The case has since inspired at least 2 feature films loosely based on the event, a 2007 horror film titled Night Skies and a 2017 found-footage science fiction thriller called Phoenix Forgotten, cementing the sightings as a permanent fixture of American UFO pop culture well beyond the original witnesses and researchers. The Arizona chapter of the Mutual UFO Network has continued fielding inquiries and organizing discussion around the case for decades, treating March 13th as something close to an annual point of reflection for the state's UFO research community. Similar lights reappeared over Phoenix in both February 2007 and April 2008, and both of those follow-up incidents were resolved far more quickly and completely than the original. The 2007 lights traced within weeks to flares dropped by F-16 out of Luke Air Force Base, and the 2008 lights traced within 48 hours to a local resident who had attached flares to helium balloons and released them, a conclusion confirmed by police helicopter observation that the two copycat incidents were identified almost immediately, while the original 1997 case has sat only partially resolved for nearly 3 decades, is itself one of the details researchers most frequently point to when arguing the earlier event deserves more scrutiny, not less. What makes the Phoenix Lights such an unusually well-documented case by UFO standards is exactly how cleanly it splits into a solved half and an unsolved half. The 10 p.m. flares have a named squadron, a named pilot willing to confirm it publicly, matching flare physics and matching video evidence, about as complete a resolution as any UFO-adjacent case in modern history ever receives. The earlier V-shaped formation has amateur telescope observations pointing toward aircraft, but no radar confirmation, no formal government investigation, and testimony from credible witnesses, up to and including a state governor insisting what they saw wasn't several airplanes flying close together at all. So which part of that night still bothers you more? That the government's own initial denial of any military activity turned out to be sloppy paperwork rather than a cover-up, or that, 30 years on, no federal agency has ever formally investigated the one object that hundreds of thousands of people, including the man who ran the entire state, still insist wasn't a formation of airplanes at all.